Thanks a million to Ruairí and Molly for reaching out to us in the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre to come along and talk today. And it's amazing to be part of the conversation. It seems really important work as well, and really important conversations. So we're delighted to be here as well. So I'm just going to talk it's not really a long talk really. So I'm just going to share a few small slides. So basically, I just want to remind people that of the helpline again. I know that it's been put in the chat a number of times, but the 24-hour helpline is there nationally for anybody impacted by sexual violence in any way. So that's for every gender, every person across Ireland. And it is there also for anybody supporting people or impacted in other ways who are supporting them as well. So just to know that too. So just to note that I'm speaking from the perspective of a Rape Crisis Centre, where we see the impact of male violence against women firsthand in the form of sexual violence. What I want to really touch on this evening is kind of the issues that are out there and why. And obviously, I'm not going to be able to cover all the issues. It's far more complicated and far-reaching than what I'm going to cover, but I'm just touching on some of it. And so I'll also talk to you about what we're doing in DRCC in this arena, and kind of going to concentrate on some suggested solutions that aren't happening really on a large scale right now as well. So we're really aware in Ireland recently that people, and in particular many women, are really upset and fearful, and it's a new fear and a new upset they're reminded of because of the reality of gender-based violence in our society that primarily really affects women. And such violence is the most often perpetrated by people known to the victims and survivors, but sometimes can also be perpetrated by a stranger. And the reality is that women understand that they're particularly vulnerable simply by the virtue of their gender. So it doesn't seem very fair at all. So the Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality last year highlighted this too, and it affirms that sexual violence is a gender equality issue, and it made a series of recommendations. So there is a lot of momentum in this area recently. So despite growing awareness around the issue of gender-based violence, reliable and harmonized data on the prevalence is still hard to find. So there are a lot of snippets that I'm going to take you through in a short minute or two, but they're only kind of just little snippets of data that are there. There's some limited research out there, as I was saying, and it really reinforces what we're seeing and hearing from the victims and survivors that come to us for help and support. And yet we know there's many, many more out there who don't seek help because they feel they won't be believed and that they blame themselves in some way. And this blame comes from society that too often puts the blame on victims rather than perpetrators. And this can come from a place of trying to protect ourselves, I think, from the reality of sexual violence, but it also can come from a climate where many forms of violence and abuse are acceptable. So at a very basic level, for example, sexist jokes and language can degrade, reinforce negative stereotypes, make it easier to treat women and girls with less respect, and it can disregard human rights and their well-being. This type of behaviour can be common to with boys and men. It doesn't help that we know that people are greatly influenced by problematic portrayals of women and men in media, in culture, and in pornography. And it can also lead to various forms of male violence against women, particularly when men have become desensitized to violent behaviour and where they become programmed to normalise it. So it is it's just a snippet of the issues that are out there. So some data, in the absence of having a national research on sexual violence, which we have had in the past, but it's very dated. It was in 2002 called the Savvy Report, and it was a really large scale snippet of data that is there. There is a new version of this data research that's going to be coming out in the next couple of years, and the CSO are taking on that data. So it's going to be very useful for us to see what the national picture is. But there is some little snippets that have come out in the last couple of years that I just thought I'd highlight for you. So the national research in 2020, Maynooth University and TCD did some research, and the main findings there were that 15% of Irish adults had been raped at some point in their life. So that was a kind of across society research. 1 in 3 adults have experienced some form of sexual violence, and one in 5 have been raped in their lifetime, compared to 1 in 10 of men. So you can see there the prevalence of men versus women versus men. In college too, and schools, there's a high prevalence of sexual violence. And this is an area where we've actually had quite a bit of research in the last couple of years. A very recent survey that just released the data was taken out last year by the Higher Education Authority. And it said that there was more than 3,000 female students responded to questions on non-consensual sex. And of these, 34%, and there was more than 1,100 students, experienced non-consensual vaginal penetration through coercion, incapacitation, and force, or threat of force. So it's a high percentage of sexual violence that's happening with young people. So it's happening too at work, in workplaces, and we know that Higher Education Authority, there's another version of the report for staff in higher education, but in work generally, it's there too. It's a high prevalence too. So the DRCC conducted a survey in 2017, in which around the time of Me Too, which showed about 60% of respondents were sexually harassed at work, and yet most didn't report the harassment. So that's a common thread throughout all the research that's there as well. So it's happening at home too as well. So we know from international statistics, we know from statistics in DRCC and the Rape Crisis Centres, that the majority of people that come for help, the violence is perpetrated by somebody known to them. So it's kind of different to what people imagine. And I'd say a lot of you are very, very familiar with that fact too. So just for example, then the Sexual Assault Treatment Unit released their data for 2020, and there was 80% of people that came there for support were assaulted by someone that they know, that was known to them. And just to put in there as well, that in 2018, a Youth Work Ireland report showed that 20% of young people find pornography useful resource for information of healthy relationships. And there's a lot of other research around pornography and the negative impact that's having as well. So then just to move on to what we're doing in DRCC, or what we have done, it's just in terms of youth programs, we have, sorry for the tech issues, we have a lot of youth programs in DRCC in the form of Body Right and Let's Get Real, which are programs where we train educators on how to talk to young people about the nature of sexual violence, steps to healthy relationships, and equal consent. And then Let's Get Real program looks at trying to engage young people to be critical consumers of media, culture, and pornography, because we know they're consuming a lot of information and ideas about the world, about sex and behaviour from these mediums, but they're not actually aware of the potential impact or the potential negative impact. So we train the trainers in these programs, and we've been doing that for over 10 years. We give them guidance, resources, and training, and share best practice really with each other as well. We also have a great youth advisory group that's around about 2 years now, started just before COVID. And we have a group of 18 to 25-year-olds that help inform our work. So they look at our material, and they also give us ideas of campaigns. If anyone's interested in joining that, the email is there, and we are particularly interested in men joining the youth advisory group. And we do a lot of advocacy and support, which is a huge part of our work, and we highlight the issues and impacts. And some of the solutions are raising awareness, training around dignity and respect, and employment in colleges, and education and curriculum as well. Another big part of our work at the moment is an exciting project around consent, which started last year, where we started off with some research on consent. And with the over kind of arching finding there was that 70% of people in Ireland believe there's a problem with consent. So this campaign and project is really trying to embrace the whole of society and these issues. And it's a long-term collaborative project, and you can see there what it's going to look like. So just moving on then, what needs to change really across society, what we can do. I think male violence against women is heavily weighted by historical and current unequal balance of power between men and women and between boys and girls. Violence against women.
Another minute there, Caitriona, thanks.
Yeah, I'm just finished now. Violence against women is a big factor that underpins men power and control over women in the world. In an equal society, it's not really good enough. We need to act, to do something to act. And so this is a great starting point. We do have a lot of momentum right now as well. And I think what we need to do is kind of think about what's positive now. And there's a lot of people involved in the conversation. So there has been a lot of male voices wanting to be part of the solution. So I think it's really, really positive. I think I've heard that from a lot of my peers as well. So it can be part of the solution, and it's just not a women's issue. So this is what we were thinking, and it comes across at research across internationally as well. This is what we would say that could be done by men and by everybody really, to learn more about the issues, to start conversations with other men, get talking about it, examine their own attitudes and actions, and think about how we might perpetrate sexism and violence. Because even though in the front of our head we don't think we do, it can definitely be the case. Challenge and speak out against harmful behaviour. That's difficult to challenge if we do it safely. An inclusive society really needs